If you're out there and you can hear me, then this conversation is definitely for you. How's it going, folks? Yahya Ibrahim here with another video, and today I'm going to be talking about a topic that is very important to me. It's something that a lot of people ask me about on a regular basis, and that is my diet. They want to know how I eat, what I eat, how much of what I eat. And it's something that is sometimes hard to explain because some people can't wrap their minds around the concept of not consuming meat. I do not consume meat currently. I But I will say this, I'm not a big fan of labels. So I don't like to call myself vegan. I don't like to call myself vegetarian. But for a lack of better terms, I may associate myself with uh, that protocol, that diet, in order to easily explain my eating habits. But when people ask me if I don't mind going into greater detail, I always tell them, I follow a predominantly, a mostly plant-based diet, with the exception of me periodically consuming honey. So yeah, mostly I consume a plant-based diet. You can call it vegan if you wish, but I just don't like to use that title. Um, a lot of vegans don't consume honey. Some vegans do consume honey and they still consider themselves vegan, but I also wear leather and I'm not the most ethical when it comes to other aspects of what I consume as a consumer. So I don't like to use the title vegan, but for a lack of better terms, for the time being, I will say that I follow a plant-based diet. Okay, so in order to understand how I came to this point, you kind of have to know a little bit about my history, what brought me to this diet, why I chose to be fully plant-based with the exception of the honey that I consume. With around the age of 9. Around the age of 9, I decided that I was done consuming red meat. I wanted nothing to do with it. And I guess it was because I was pretty aware and conscious of what I ate and how I ate at a very young age. I spent a lot of time in libraries. I spent a lot of time in cooking in the kitchen with my grandmother, with my great grandmother, even when she was alive. So, that's one of the things that I have to point out, that it started at a very young age for me, the process, the transition rather, and it started with me not consuming red meat. At the time, my family was surprisingly very supportive of of me making this decision to not consume red meat anymore. And I did have some issues when, in social gatherings, if I was at a family function, or if I was over a friend's house, or at school through school lunches. So that really prompted me to learn to prepare my own lunch, and it also encouraged me to learn to cook, because if I wanted to continue eating the way I ate, I had to, number one, be educated about what foods didn't contain those food items, and secondly, how to prepare the food that I like to consume. So as the years went by, my eating habits evolved more, and I went from just consuming non-red meats to omitting chicken and poultry. Well, I'll say poultry out of my diet. So I didn't consume red meat or poultry, and I became more of like a pescatarian. and I consumed fish mostly, but predominantly it was vegetarian-based diet. So it was a lot of veggies, it was a lot of fruit, grains, legumes, seeds, and periodically I would consume fish. So I did that for a while. I started doing that around my junior year of high school, and a lot of my classmates and friends, they would say, well, you must have a very clean colon, you must have regular bowel movements. Excuse me if that, you know, is a bit too much information, but it was something that we joked about a lot at the lunch table. So I did that for a while, and it really helped me. I became more educated. I started educating myself more about food and what I'm consuming. I started getting into consuming more organic foods. I started getting into consuming wild-caught fish, and around this time, I started working my sophomore year of high school. So I was always actively working, so I was able to save money, use those funds, even though it was a part-time job. I used those funds to put toward food that I wanted to prepare, to basically fund my dietary needs. So maybe around my senior year of high school, I transitioned into becoming a lacto-ovo vegetarian. I still consumed eggs and I still consumed dairy. And I was always a bit lactose intolerant, but it seemed the more I omitted things out of my diet, the more intolerant to dairy and lactose I became. So there were a few things I could get away with consuming, like goat cheese and some hard cheeses, maybe ice cream even. But then it got worse over time, and I started consuming dairy products. I could tell when I consumed dairy products, my skin would really break out, and I just didn't feel up to par. I knew that it was making me sluggish. So I was like, okay, I started hearing a lot about veganism. And I was like, I want to try this. I want to see what this is all about. So after I graduated high school, I started experimenting with omitting dairy completely out of my diet. I was not vegan at the time because I still consumed eggs, but I did omit dairy out of my diet. Now, when I was the age of 18, I saw an infomercial for Jack LaLanne, a Jack LaLanne infomercial, and it was for his juicer. So I purchased my first Jack LaLanne juicer at the age of 18, and I felt unstoppable. I was juicing everything. So about the first week of me buying the juicer, I went on like a 4-day juice fast, and then following that I did a 3-day version of the Master Cleanse, which is this cleansing of consuming a lemonade made of fresh lemon juice, cayenne pepper, maple syrup, and I would consume like the senna leaf tea and things like that. So I was really in tune and conscious of those things at a very young age, and now it's like all the rage. So I would say that a lot of that came from me educating myself at a very young age about how our food was produced, where it came from, and I have to say that growing up, that was never something that we thought about, because you just automatically assumed the food you consume was natural. If it came from the earth, if it came from soil, or if it was raised on a farm, you just assumed that it was unadulterated with genetic modification and chemicals, and that it did not come from depleted soils, that this food you were consuming was all natural. But I later found out, as most people are discovering today, that that's just not the case with our food system or the foods that we consume, whether it be at restaurants or food you consume in the home that you've purchased from grocery stores. So I started educating myself more about these things. There was a book that I purchased because I was so interested in health and wellness and natural cures and things of that nature. A lot of people in my family, especially my great-grandmother, suffered from ailments like diabetes, hypertension. So these are things that can be prevented with food. So when people ask me what led me to adopting a plant-based diet, it was for that reason. It was for health reasons, and also just being more conscious of how things were being produced. And I wanted to consume only the best. You know, I was very in tune with my body at the time, and I saw my body as a temple, and I only wanted to put the best fuel in my body. So, you know, I have nothing against meat eaters or the consumption of meat. If that's something you do, I do present times where I currently follow a majority plant-based diet, and I definitely will say that you can eat a plant-based diet and still be a very unhealthy person if you're consuming a lot of processed things. So this brings us to what I actually eat within that plant-based protocol. Pretty much I only eat whole foods as much as possible. There are times when it may be unavoidable, but I do consume only whole foods, and I tend to prepare most of the meals that I consume. So I don't eat out a lot. Like I said, there are times, for the sake of being social, that I may step out and do something where I have to eat out, but I try not to eat out a lot. I tend to cook most of my meals, and it tends to consist of fruits, veggies, grains, legumes, nuts, seeds. Unfortunately, I haven't been consuming a lot of nuts lately because where I live, they are so expensive. So you have to really get them, you have to find them on sale in order for it to be worth it. But I do consume a lot of seeds as a result of that. So I make that up with consuming seeds, getting those healthy fats in, and also I consume a lot of grains in the form of more heirloom varieties like sprouts, your kamuts, your barleys, your rye. I consume a lot of pseudo grains like quinoa, buckwheat, or kasha kashi. I forget sometimes what it's called, but it's pretty much the roasted buckwheat. So yeah, I consume that, and there's also, I consume teff, and sometimes, if I'm not mistaken, I believe farro is similar to spelt. I could be wrong, don't quote me on that. But sometimes I kind of play around with those grains. I am not gluten-free. I do not I do not consume a gluten-free diet. I do eat wheat-related products, but I try to, things with gluten, I try to consume the grains with the most proteins. Your spelts, your rye, your barleys, that kind of thing. It's not that super processed wheat that a lot of people have intolerances or sensitivities to. So I try to consume those things, and I tend to fare really well with consuming those things. I get a lot of protein, and that's another thing that people ask me, where do you get your protein? If you're consuming the right foods and enough of the right foods, you will have no problem with protein or a deficiency of protein for that matter. Like I stated, a lot of the grains that I consume are complete proteins. They do offer a lot of proteins. One of those is quinoa, and I know that's one of those things that's kind of overrated now. It has oversaturated the market, but I undeniably can't help the fact that I love it. I love quinoa, and I love the taste, I love the texture, I love how I prepare it, and I will do a few preparation videos, food preparation videos and recipes on this channel, so just look forward to that. Because like I said, I do love cooking, I do love being creative, although I'm not creative on a regular basis because I'm usually very busy, so I try to just get food on the table. I keep it very simple on a weekly basis, and sometimes special occasions or times when I have more free time, I will prepare a meal, but everything I do prepare is from scratch. I don't use a lot of packaged things, bottled things, with the exception of, like I was saying, I do consume legumes, beans. There are times when I'm lazy and I don't feel like soaking them, and I just cook them. I use a tin of beans. That's my go-to when I'm super busy and I'm lazy and I just don't have time to wait. Sorry, I live near a major street, and sometimes we get large buses and trucks passing, so if you hear that, that's what that is. Please excuse that. So yeah, like I was saying, I will make shortcuts sometimes by using a tin of beans or lentils. I mostly like to consume chickpeas, or some people know them as garbanzo beans, and I also consume a lot of lentils. You have the misr lentils, which are the red ones, or I think they're called masur dal in Indian stores, Indian cuisine stores. I also consume a lot of split peas, not so much as I do lentils, but on occasion I consume the split peas. So that covers the beans and legumes that I consume. When I have time, I do soak the beans that I consume, mostly the chickpeas or the garbanzo beans. I soak those. But the lentils, I don't really soak those, I just cook them. So without going into great detail about my day-to-day eating habits, I just wanted to briefly cover what my diet was and what it consisted of in a general sense. So as I stated, that is a mostly plant-based diet, with the exception of honey periodically. And I'm not vegan. I know some vegans, some people consider themselves vegan and they still consume honey, and then you have the vegans that don't consume honey because they see the production of honey excuse me. But if I do consume honey, it is the most ethically sourced honey I can find, guaranteed. And I do this because I see it as a foundation for health. That's why I eat this way. That's what brought me to this place in my life, why I chose to eat this way. And honestly, I would say that I have reaped great benefits from it. But furthermore, I would say that, especially dealing with social anxiety, I have noticed that when I've strayed away from my eating habits, my normal eating habits, which are whole food, plant-based foods, then it doesn't contribute to relief of the symptoms of my disorder, I guess you could call it. Normally, when I'm feeling down and depressed and I don't want to socialize or I don't want to be around people, it's typically me consuming a lot more processed things. They're still plant-based, but they're not whole food items. So that's why I stress that more than anything. More than plant-based, I stress whole food items. Because the less processed your food is, the more easily assimilated. So I would say that before I would say plant-based, but I still think that plant-based is the way to go. You know, you can take from this what you will. I hope that some of this resonates with you. And I will do future videos going into finer detail about my diet, what I eat, and like I stated before, I will be doing some cooking videos, recipe videos, but I don't want to make this video too long, so I will stop here. And I hope watching this video, any of this has resonated with you. I ask that you please like, comment, or subscribe. And if you do subscribe, make sure you hit that notification bell so that you can get the notifications and updates of any of the content that I upload on YouTube. I hope that you take care of yourself. As always, live in bliss. I will see you next time.